Here we go. We're going, right? It's time to start. We are live in the Nutmeg Tavern. I am your host, John Townsend. And we have plenty of nutmeg, and we're ready to start this day. It was a cold, rainy day, so we need the nice warm tea, the nutmeg on top, filling the air. It's wonderful in here. I am joined by Ivy, who's on the console.
Hello.
And Lauren, who is manning the chat and all that good stuff.
Hello.
You probably saw the poll that just popped up. So we pop up the little chat on the screen sometimes, and some people like it and some people don't like it. We thought we would poll you to find, there it is. We thought we would poll you to see whether or not it just was super annoying or, hey, that's fun. So it's up to you. You get to choose, but you have to bear with the majority or whatever. I see lots of people in the chat there. Rob Zena, Macaroni Gluer, Ollie Burden, Shady Hill Homestead, Dark Rose, Pygar 2, Barbara Fowler, Call Me Stan, all the way from Poland, and Sarah and Squirrel and Ben and all these folks. So welcome in everyone. There's plenty of room. In fact, we are virtually limitless in the ability and the number of people we can cram into the Nutmeg Tavern, which is incredible if you think about it.
I'd like to
jump in.
Do a little bit. So we have a super chat from Mandatory Carry. Thank you. This will be very important for decades to come.
Thank you.
And we have a member chat from Ben. Happy Friday.
Yes.
And we have a new member from someone who has little accent marks over their name. So
yeah.
I'm going to mispronounce it if I say
Mate?
it.
Rose?
Maybe. Let's go with that. And then a happy Friday from John Talley.
Yay.
And then a message from Rabzina Warrior Princess. Hi Townsends, I just received my package and I absolutely love the roving sheep. There is always something delightful at Townsends. And the roving sheep, they're up on the mantelpiece. I added them this week.
You can see them right up there.
Uh-huh.
Right up there.
But you want to tell them about the CD?
Okay, so before we get into this very, very hefty topic, I guess we'll do the light and easy stuff. So this is brand new on the website today, right?
Yep.
Brand new on the website today. You can't see it. If it would focus, I would do that, but it won't. So you've heard. How about that? Does it work like that?
That's better.
There we go. There it is. Very good. Caleb, who is one of the members of the video team, he does shooting and editing. He's sort of Aaron's right-hand man, and he's also a musician and person who does recording studio stuff on the side. You know, he doesn't have anything better to do. He's just slightly busy. But he's helped us out with music that you've heard on the channel. Sometimes Ryan does music. Of course, a lot of music is done by Jim's Red Pants, which is Rick and Hillary Wagner. But this is Caleb Lewis, and he's gone ahead and put together all of his pieces that he's done for Townsend's videos. And so this is a full-length CD. It's available on our website. You'll find a link down in the description section. So if you're interested in kind of you want a hard copy of the music, and Caleb's done a fabulous job. So super thank you, Caleb, and there it is. There we go. Did I miss something about paramedic? What was that one? I saw it pop up
Yes, Eways says, here for the medical knowledge. As a paramedic, I'm fascinated with medical history.
Excellent. Reminds me, one of the people you don't see, one of the Townsends that you don't see is my other daughter. So I got two of them here. The other daughter is a paramedic in Fort Wayne and does paramedic training and all that good stuff. So those are one of those near and dear kind of things. So this topic today is, how am I going to say? It is so deep and so new to us that you're going to be coming along on this adventure with me as we dive into this material, because it goes deep, 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 and we're just going to skim the surface and try to get as much as we can. I have not had time to digest this for a month or two. I've had like a day. Because Lauren found this great piece of information as she was perusing the 18th century newspapers, like we all do in the morning. I know, I'm sure you do too. Anyway, she found this section about the Philadelphia Hospital in 1794, and it was sort of like the yearly minutes. Now, normally we think the minutes of a meeting. Those are the things you bypass or you skip over. That's today. So we know if we are part of a club or an organization that has a minutes in a meeting, we were usually there for the last meeting, and snororama, last thing we want to know is what happened in the last meeting. But in this case, 200 years later, the meetings, the minutes and the information, the accounting of a hospital is incredibly informative, especially that it's very, very detailed, like down to the penny, what they spent on this, what they did here, what they did that. And so we get a snapshot of what's going on in a hospital in colonial America. In fact, it is basically the premier hospital in the United States in the 1790s. It is a hospital that was started by Benjamin Franklin in the 1750s along with other people, and they continue to build this, and it becomes a very important hospital as we get to right here at the switch over from the 18th to the 19th century. Things are happening in this hospital that are maybe more up to date than you would find in places in Great Britain, because of the way they're treating people and the people who are, instrumental in the teaching and the treatment. So, extremely interesting topic. So, I don't even know where. I've got like 100 papers on my desk here. Let me figure out exactly where I'm at. And you've got the links to, is it the 1794 part or the 1799 part?
Yes, there's several links in the description. So there's the very first one that's just titled newspaper. That one is the 1794 or 95 newspaper article. Mm-hmm. And then there's another one that's 1799. And then there's a couple different additional ones that kind of give a little bit of context about what the hospital's for and other aspects of it.
Right. Okay. So you've got most of the information there down in the links. If you want to open that up in another window, you can even put it over the top of my face if you really want to. And read along with me or dig in, or you can dig in after the fact. If you've got information or ideas as you read or know about things, you want to pop it into the chat, perfect opportunity. Do that. That's what this live stream is all about. So let's get sick. Oh no, we do have some slides so you can kind of see some of them as we read through them. I'm going to start at the top of the 1795 part, and it talks about where their money starts to come from. And we're immediately confused because we have two different columns of money. And it's like sometimes it's one, sometimes it's another. It's like they have to, already money is very, very confusing in this time period. We've got Conti and we have specie. So we probably have paper money basically, and then hard money. So some things are accounted for in one way or the other. Some of this might be accounted for in either colonial money or Pennsylvania money. Is so complicated. So most of the time we just have to kind of, unless we really want to dig into what's going on with the money, we just basically have to skip over it, because it's like, are we talking about real money? Are we talking about paper money? What's the equivalency? Almost impossible to figure out. How they accounted for anything, I don't know. And as you can see, it was complicated for them. But we get money in here, and they talk about where the incoming money is coming from. Now, this hospital is not, it's not funded by taxes. It's funded by contributions, a little bit of the money that they're getting from patients, and so it's It's mostly really from contributions. And we have a whole accounting here. Let's see. For board patients, including old debt. And then we have some money coming in from legacies and contributions, from ground rents. So the hospital does own some buildings and ground around it, and they get some money from it. There's a charity box. Students are paying for the privilege of attending and using the library and attending the house, which is, learning basically. Sometimes they deliver certificates and they charge them for that. We've got lecture money, so people attend a lecture and they pay money in for that. And from gentlemen viewing them. So for gentlemen viewing the lectures, let's see, a little money came in from funeral charges. They sold some small things. So some of the people working in there might sell things. Let's see, patients paying for washing. They even got money for hay raised on the lots. And here we go, from patients who paid for getting their shirts cleaned and for shaving. So they had to pay for getting shaved. Don't you love it? It's like that's down to the accounting on that. Oh, we got 13 cents from that guy for shaving him on that one morning. The hospital has a garden, and so some of the, and sort of like livestock, if that's kind of a little hard to believe, but the hospital produces milk and butter and veal and pork. And there's money that comes in from that. Some of that is paid. Some of those things are used in-house, and sometimes apparently they sell it. They also bought. You can go back to me, Ivy. You don't have to stay on that. They also talk about what they paid for meat. So they had used 17,000 chunks of meat, 1 to 4 pounds, 59 legs of beef from the market. We've got poultry and fish. We've got like 300 pounds of cheese. Let's see, medicinal herbs used in 18th century hospitals. Yes, sometimes they're growing in the gardens. They're growing herbs, and we'll touch base on that.
Let me. So we talked about it in the last live stream too, but the hospital we visited down in St. Augustine, and they have. We did a couple different videos there, 2 different. And there's ones. Also another video on the channel that's about medicinal herbs. Yeah,
there was medicinal herbs that we did at Conner Prairie, and then there was the one on medicines that we did down at St. Augustine. So yes, you're going to work on that, chat. She'll work on putting links into that. So they bought meat, they bought cheese, barrels of flour. They paid for baking of bread, and they paid for yeast, bread, biscuit, rice, and meal. They also butter, lard bought in the market, brown sugar, loaf sugar. So they're using a lot of those kinds of things. Now, more fascinating here, or even just as fascinating, 300 pounds of chocolate, 100 pounds of coffee, and the equivalent of about 100 pounds of tea there, 37, maybe a little bit more. So lots of coffee, chocolate, tea, breakfast time. Looks like you wanted to say something, but okay. They also used roots, vegetables, herbs. Probably didn't need much of that. Meat and cheese will cover it. A little bit of bread. Salt, fruit, spices, eggs. And then they kind of cover the whole thing. Now, the next section, fascinating again. I don't think you'll probably see this in many hospitals today, but they also used, is it 80 or 30? Anyway, lots of casks of wine, 120 gallons of rum, spirits, and brandy. They didn't break those out. They just put those all together. 17 barrels of beer, and 18 dozens, or I'm not sure exactly how they're accounting for this, bottles of porter, and then They're also using, in the same section, 228 gallons of molasses, which they might have used to make table beer. It might be in this spot because of that. It's not necessarily used as a sweetener, but used to make more drink. And then 704 gallons of vinegar, which likely there's so many gallons of vinegar here because they're using it for a disinfectant, which is a common disinfectant of the time period. And then they talk about cows and calves bought and bushels of grain here, probably just for the cattle. We've got potter's ware that they were using, probably like broken bedpans, so they're having to replace it and buy lots of pottery. We've got wood being hauled and bushels of coal, 900 bushels of coal. And then, fascinatingly, 519 pounds of candles. That's a lot of candles. Yeah, hey, now. Be careful about those. Those vegetables, they're for animals to eat, obviously. That's why we grow vegetables. So the candle section is fun here because in a different section here, I think it's in the timeline section. We didn't have the newspaper article for it, but in 1780, the hospital is so dependent on fireplaces and candles that they're very concerned, the Board of Managers is concerned about fire prevention. Fires it's really bad in anybody's spot, but can you imagine a hospital catching on fire? That's very, very dangerous. And so the hospital acquires in 1780 a fire engine of its own, a pump. And so that they can, and they're so proud of it that they haul it out at every board meeting and squirt it around for fun. So there you go. Lots of fire.
Somebody was wondering, Brian B. was wondering, why so many candles? And I was wondering if it was for lighting surgeries.
It could be for lighting surgeries, or it could be that, in hospitals like today, a nurse comes around, wakes you up, you're asleep, and, every 15 minutes they're waking you up. You can't go around and, tend to people at night without some kind of lighting. And, in a house, that's not a big deal. People walk around the house. It's like, oh, I can go down and find my way to the outhouse in the dark, no problem. But if you're in a hospital setting and you need to care for someone, you have to have light, and so you have to have some kind of light source. You can have something like an oil lamp, but that's a little more dangerous because you've got this kind of liquid oil going around, and they're not as they're a dirtier light in the time period, and so candles are kind of as nice as you're going to get. So there you go. They also had to pay for, they talk about the repairs. So they paid carpenters, blacksmiths, bricklayers, pump makers, lumber, ironmongery, sand and lime, and glazing. They paid wages for nurses, for housemaids, for cooks, for gardeners. They paid more to gardeners than they did to nurses. Barbers, gatekeepers. So, in fact, the gatekeepers, I don't know how many they had, but they're paid pretty well. They hired horses and carts and men to attend them to haul soil, if you know what I mean, from the plot of the new building to raise and level the ground. So maybe this is just hauling dirt. Paid for the care of horses and cows. They paid for whitewashing and washwomen, and paid for chimney sweeps. So we know they have chimney sweeps going on in Philadelphia in the 1790s. I don't know what that one is. Paying something. So I've run at the end of my my little chart here. Yeah, laborers in the tow field and about the house. They paid for bedding and furniture and bedsteads, chairs, tubs, baskets, ladles, glass, tinware, spoons, kettles, pans, knives, and forks. Here we go. The apothecary shop. 72 pounds of lint for wounds and sores. Linen and flannel for bandages, splints, skins, tape. thread, tow, and ticking instruments, and spend that much for instruments, paper, ink, quills, wafers. So wafers are what you use to seal your letters. So instead of using sealing wax and stamps, they were using wafers. Then there's some really interesting thing going on here in the medical library. So this is a learning hospital. And so there's a major teaching aspect to it. So they have a medical library and they have anatomical preparation. So they've got stuff in jars like hearts and brains and whatnot. So yes.
Somebody is asking, would they have hired some kind of security?
Well, they had the gatekeepers. Yes, and they definitely had to have security. We haven't talked about what this hospital specializes in yet, so we'll get to that. So hold that thought. So,
and
yeah.
Brian B. was wondering, did they just use like regular knives and other things for surgery?
No, they have special surgical equipment made just for that, and they had special knives that were shaped specifically for different kinds of surgical operations. So just like you would have today, they have these different sort of surgical trays that are put together. This kind of surgery, you're going to need these kinds of instruments, and they have the same kind of specialized instruments, not nearly as specialized as today, obviously, but they have specialized instruments.
Somebody is wondering where this hospital is.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And it's actually in town.
Yeah.
The two places it talked about were like right there in the middle of town.
Yes. And that's a topic we'll touch on too.
Somebody was wondering if we knew how nurses were trained during the time period.
I couldn't relate to that specifically. I think that they're basically, it's sort of like a handed down thing. I don't know that there's specific nursing training, and it would probably be, I can't speak to that beyond that.
When was anesthesia first introduced for use in hospitals, and how was it made? And it's far enough past our time period.
Yeah, you're talking about ether there, I think is really the first thing, and it's beyond our time period and way outside, but I'll bet you somebody in the chat can inform you on that.
Side note, were barbers considered medical workers maybe during doing bloodletting or tooth extractions or surgeries?
In this time period, barbers are very much a secondary or sort of, there's even kind of three levels there. There's the barber, then there's the surgeon, and then there's the physician. And in fact, there's a big gap here generally between physicians and surgeons. We kind of think about that as like a medical doctor, and we kind of mush those all together. But in the time period, surgeons were kind of very lower tier. Oh, they just slice and dice. They're just butchers, basically, and kind of glue the person back together and hope for the best. Whereas a physician has really got the knowledge, and they may, at times, lower themselves to surgery, but generally not.
Okay, so was it just as expensive back then to be hospitalized as relative to today?
This hospital is a hospital for the poor. So they're probably not getting charged or not getting charged much.
I think somewhere in one of them, it talks about the remaining patients and how many were paying patients and how many were there who were not paying patients, who were being supported by the contributions to the hospital.
Right.
And I don't think it was 50-50. I think there were actually more paying patients, but there was quite a lot of that going on in this particular hospital. Somebody was wondering, how was the hospital food in the 18th century? And when we were visiting St. Augustine, they actually touched on that, the menu and the food that would have been served in the hospital. And this, you can see, it talks about the food that they had. Sounds pretty good.
Meat, bread, wine. I guess if you want vegetables, they'll have those too.
They're wondering what you're drinking today.
I've got tea, a wonderful oolong tea, and then this is mead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, we were in the library in the anatomical preparations. So they paid for spirits of wine to fill bottles and for varnish. So that's for doing your preparations. You're going to have these jars of anatomical samples. Put these into spirits of wine, which is highly refined alcohol, so that it won't go bad. And then varnish is probably for like varnishing like samples that don't need to stay in the, I don't know what those would be, but I'll bet they were disgusting. Anyway, books chiefly imported from London. So they got medical books coming from London, which they paid a good quantity for. They have ribbons for student certificates. Ribbons were expensive, or at least they managed to account for them. Then we have this very interesting section here. Paid Susanna Abingdon for the first half year's payment due her 25th of the 10th of blah, 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 for anatomical preparations, bought of her for £30 sterling per annum during her life, which at her death will be the property of the hospital, and this sum to be whatever, right? So what happened was apparently this Susanna Abingdon had in her possession, probably given to her by some other relative, all these anatomical preparations, and she has she's sort of renting them to the hospital, and then when she dies, they become the hospital's property. And so we find out about that here. Incidental expenses, funeral charges, clothing, feeds and plow. So they had to pay for a plow. Utensils, cart, wheelbarrows, shovels, brushes, returned to the patients money needed more for their... So the patients paid them, and they had to pay the patients back because they didn't need it. And then they even have a little small articles, things like starch, indigo, mustard. I don't know. It's like maybe the mustard was used for food, or maybe it was medicinal. Hard to say. And then it talks about consumed in the house, which was raised on the hospital lots. So they had almost 4,000 gallons of milk, 500 pounds of butter, 636 pounds of veal, 1,140 pounds of pork. And so apparently, there you go. They're doing a lot of that. Like raising your own food, yes.
Were medical instruments standardized from England or based on local availability / manufacture?
They're going to, while there are plenty of cutlers in the colonial America at this time, they're probably basing their instruments upon English and especially French instruments in the time period. They both are very, renowned for their medical prowess in the time period, and so those instruments are going to be probably undoubtedly patterned off of, and some of them might even be imported from there or made locally.
Is there a specific book on wild plants in North America from the 18th and 19th centuries, and what medical uses would these plants have had? And I put in the chat the one for the British.
Yeah, British, yeah.
Virtues, but
I don't know about North American, it being published in the time period. I mean, there are things you'll find now, and there was a huge work that was done in the 20th century on the plants for medicine and for food for Native Americans. It's a giant work of research about that. But what they know and what they've published in North America is minuscule.
Somebody was wondering if there were any records of payments to the resurrectionists.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I don't know. It's hard to say. If we dug in to some of these, we might get a hint of whether or not it's like where their training cadavers come from. Because these anatomical preparations, right? These organs got to come from someplace. And I mean, They don't just pop out of the ground without help. So that's really good question. And maybe if we dig further in here, we can find that. We did see here, as we go on, there's money incoming, and we have individual contributors here. And interestingly enough, if we see the fourth one down, Dr. Philip Sig-Physic, he donates money. He is one of the people who works in the hospital. So he's working in the hospital, and he's also donating to the hospital. And there's even a donation here from a formerly poor patient. So someone paid in. It only has his initials here, but he gave a donation because at one point he was in the hospital and they didn't charge him. So he's kind of returning the favor. Talk about their capital stock, what their grounds are worth, their different pieces of estate. Here's where it gets fascinating, and I'm gonna stop here. Here's where it gets.
Wait, because I would like to catch up with some things.
Yes, go ahead.
Brian B is wondering if a resurrectionist is a real thing. So I put in the chat the link to the resurrectionist video. So you want to talk about that a bit? Right.
So definitely check out the. Did we just do one?
No, this one was from quite some time ago.
Okay, so we did the resurrectionist that Carol Jarboe does. She might even be, who knows, in the chat someplace, or they're off to an event. It's hard to say. But she has done in the past a resurrectionist persona and a lot of research on people basically digging up dead bodies to use for cadavers and whatnot for medical research. And yes, it was a very big thing. There are people who have said that, from in the, say, early 19th century time period that, maybe half the graves out there are empty because someone came along and stole the body. And there was a big industry on protecting graves to keep people from coming and stealing the body. And it wasn't necessarily illegal. It was illegal if you stole anything else out of the grave, like if you took the clothes or if they had jewelry on or something like that. That would be stealing. But if you just took the body, then it was kind of okay, right? Creepy, that's for sure.
Disrespectful, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But that medical research must go on. They have to practice on something, and the dead person isn't going to complain. So yeah, it was definitely a thing in the 18th century and in the 19th century.
Okay, so here's an off-topic question: were silver tea strainers common in the 1700s? Is that more of a 19th century thing?
Oh, you're going to find them in the 18th century, of course. Yes, very much so.
Okay. I would like to catch up on some super chats. But first, how about this question? Was this hospital a teaching hospital? Are students or interns mentioned?
Yes. Yes, I've already mentioned them in here. It is a teaching hospital. It has a large teaching library. They're doing lectures, probably even dissections. They have students come in. The students get to use the library and they pay for that. They also are paying for other things, and they even have certificates listed in here along with the ribbons for the certificates. So it's a teaching hospital, probably the premier teaching hospital in the United States at the time.
Okay. I've got some super chats here. You ready? All right. This is from Deep Alley Gourmet. God bless Townsends and God bless the dads.
Thank you.
And there is a message from Andreas Det Kelston. Townsends live. Love the whole team so much. Thank you for all of what you do.
Thank you.
And there's one from Sean Ford. Loved you guys at Mississinewa 1812. And did you want to talk a little bit about Mississinewa 1812?
Yeah, so last weekend, is it last weekend?
Yes, I'm almost certain.
Last weekend was Mississinewa 1812, Marion, Indiana, and is fabulously rainy event. No, it was a fabulous event. And it was rainy, but it was great. We got to see lots of people, and if you came by, and you got your picture with me or something. And I know some people come to the event, and they're all too shy to say hi. I haven't bit anybody yet.
Not ever. Not at any event.
So,
At least not for a while.
Let's not mention that. Anyway. But we had a great time, and I want to say thank you for everybody who dropped by and say hi.
All right, so I have a super chat from Max Harcool. I'd love to buy a box of Christmas cards with the picture on the cover of the CD you shared. Mm-hmm. Do you want to show it again? Did you need to switch to the side camera? There it is. It did. It turned out I really like that.
Let me get it straight. I'll bring it in so it's in focus. There.
Okay, and then there is, alas, I don't think we're going to, at least not for this Christmas, I don't think we'd have time to get that up.
Now we could do 18th century art that Lauren and Ivy do. Those would be good cards.
It looks very cozy though. It turned out great.
Yes, this was wonderful.
And then there's a super chat from Mate Rosa. Mm-hmm. Hello guys, thank you for the fantastic contents all these years. Keep up the good work. Greetings from Hungary.
Woo, Hungary. There we go.
And then there's a very sad super chat here. This is from Rob Dixon. Great topic today. I'm a little sad because I stopped by the store today since I was in the area, but you were closed. But it's okay. Here's some money to get a new sign. That thing is a little faded. Whoa.
I keep wanting to deal with the sign, but
the sign is
it
terrible.
Doesn't get faded.
It's really illegible at this point.
Right.
But I'm very sorry. I was the only person in the customer service today.
Yes.
So I do highly encourage, if anyone ever wants to drop by the store, if you call ahead, we will make an appointment so that someone is free to make sure to let you in. So
yeah, you just can't know if you pop by that there's going to be anyone available.
There's no way to know.
Unfortunately.
And then there is a super chat from Uncommon News 777. Pharmacopoeias, being books that describe herbs, that go back to the 1500s, I do believe.
Even probably earlier than that in some ways, definitely. Yes, and there are some available. Quincy's from our time period, and the new Edinburgh one, and even a Philadelphia, so that you can see what they're doing with medicines, what they thought they could do with medicines, or what they were trying to do with medicines. Very fascinating research.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Okay. Just to talk about this again before we get too far along, the Caleb Lewis's CD with the music that he's done for our videos. They're all sort of instrumental and fun, and Caleb is a very talented, wonderful artist there. So if you've enjoyed some of those, and did you point people to the videos that
I'm gonna work on it. I
Right.
haven't. Caleb and I are discussing which videos are the best to highlight, but he is super busy with the video for this week, so it's gonna happen a little later.
Yes, he is. So, maybe I think Cabin has some of Ryan and Caleb, and some of the more recent stuff has a lot of Caleb stuff in it. So if it's sort of guitar-y and not violin-y, then it's probably some of Caleb's work. Also, brand new people. I try to get to new people that are Patreon, and oh gosh, where are those? All those papers. I might be missing one. Well, new and renewing YouTube members. Justin Wheeler. And then somebody managed to figure out how to have a blank for their name. So thank you, blank, for being a member. And then there's Mel and AZ renewing, The Amazing AIDS, No Face, Be a Man, Rob Zena. We've got Jacob Klein. We got Lorraine Scott, Christina S., Bobby Lewis, Virginia Manning, Rita Lloyd, Jeremy Sammons, Norman Yerby, Debbie M., Jessica Gasparini, Sandra Earls, Stephanie Clay, Jonathan Lucas. Lots of people helping us out there. And hopefully I can find, I can't believe it. Cannot believe it. Somehow it either is mixed up in here. Well, if I find the Patreon names as I'm going through this, I'll stop and break for them. We have wonderful people that support us on Patreon and on Townsends Plus, and they're missing. So back to the fascinating part. Yes, Lauren.
Okay, I'm sorry. Here's another question. Jack McCall, did local doctors in cities or towns make their entire income from their profession, or was it common for them to have other jobs? Love the topic of this video.
Maybe. I would say that, this is just a guess, that they have other kinds of investments that people take care of for them as other means of income. So, you'll have like ground and then you'll have somebody else farm it. But I can't speak to that specifically. I don't have any specific accountings so that I can, kind of point to that beyond that sort of general idea.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay. So, not only have they given us all the food, and all the people, and how they're spending this, but then they give us a chart, an abstract of the cases in the hospital. Now, 1794, the chart isn't as helpful. It's interesting, but not quite as helpful as the chart that happens 5 years later in the 1799. But in 1794, we start off with lunacy. And it is the biggest number on the chart. This hospital not only does regular things like surgery and other problems, but they have a lot of people that are mentally ill. And this hospital was specifically there for mentally ill patients, and especially poor mentally ill patients. So we'll see that as being like the number one thing. And one of the premier doctors in this hospital was Benjamin Rush. And Benjamin Rush was, mental health was one of the things that was way up there. Now, in Great Britain at the time and a lot of other places, mentally ill patients were basically, you couldn't do much with them, so you just basically locked them away. And Benjamin Rush was there saying, there's something, let's see if we can do something for these people. He thought maybe that there was a problem with the lining of their blood vessels, and they were inflamed, and that was the problem with their brains. And so he was trying treatments for that. He tried different things, maybe bloodletting, maybe this or that for this problem of mentally ill patients. None of them actually worked, but at least he was working at it, and he was trying to be as humane as possible. And this hospital was famous for their humane treatment of their mentally ill patients. So they admitted 67 people for lunacy. Then there's like lunacy and fits, and that the paper was folded there so we can't see. We've got melancholy, just one person, epileptic fits. I don't know what apoplectic fits are, and then we have epileptic fits, paralytics, hysterics, scurvy. So those ones up there were just like 1s, 2s, 3s. Scurvy, we got 13 people admitted with scurvy. Palsy, fistula, 5 people with frostbite, 4 people that were dropsical. The 2 people who had pleurisy. We had 1 yellow fever. Now, that's something we'll touch on when we look at the numbers for 1799. Fevers, 36. Wounded. Then we have broken limbs, 12. Sprains, contusions, there's big bruises, right? But this one, drinking cold water.
Just one person.
Just don't do it.
Better
Just
not
don't
drink that cold water.
drink cold water, or else you'll end up in the hospital. Venereal diseases, that's another pretty high number here. They're treating people with venereal diseases. Ulcers, dysentery, gravel, burns.
Gravel?
Gravel, that would be like urinary stones. That's not, that's a bad thing. Spitting blood. Monogora or something like that. then obstructed menses. Then we have viscera obstructions. That doesn't sound good. Nervous complaints, leprosy, 2 people. I don't know what that one is. And then we have swellings, ruptures, asthma, suppression of urine, defect in sight. 1 person had a defect in sight. Rheumatism, 18 people. 23 people with diarrhea. Bad enough that you go into the hospital. Lameness, debility, cataract, and then colic. And then we get to see, as the graph goes on, the number of people who were admitted, the number of people who were cured or relieved, taken by their friend, so that they just left, eloped, which means they ran away, irregular behavior, I don't know what that means in the chart, died, and then remaining. So we can see what happens. Were they cured? What happened to them? And so they had 301 total patients, and out of that, it says 148 were cured. So half the people that came in went out apparently thinking they were fine, and they only had 31 die. I'll say that's doing pretty good.
Okay, so somebody is wondering if the asthma that they're talking about and describing in this time period is the same as the asthma we have today.
I don't have enough knowledge to speak on that.
And a couple people are wondering if they mentioned tainted brain at all.
Well, I imagine tainted brain is included in several of these. How often do doctors also get infected from the patients? I don't know. Couldn't tell you. But
so somebody is wanting to sorry.
Go, clarify.
These questions are very important.
No, clarify.
They are. So they're wondering if, when we say eloped, the only thing we think of is running away to get married. But in this particular instance, you're thinking it's just talking about running away.
Got nutmeg. Yeah, it just means run away.
Do you need some cold water?
Yeah, I need some cold water. I got nutmeg stuck in my throat.
Somebody is wondering about chamomile and its uses for medicinal uses in this time period, whether it was used medicinally.
Yes. How about that? I don't have Quincy's over here, so I could look it up. Actually, I do. It's right down there.
Uh-oh. A little too far away.
Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, you
Here,
want to
switch away from me real quick.
I'm working on it.
That's all right. Okay. Here's my copy of Quincy's. This one's dated 1782. So right in this time period, this book may have actually been in Pennsylvania for all I know. Let's see. Simples omitted. What do we want to find here? Part 1, balsamics. It might take me too long to find it, and I think it's got part of the index, so I can just look it up. So chamomile is here in oils. So they used chamomile oil. And wait, I think I see nutmeg in here. Yeah, right
distracted.
there. Nutmeg's candied. Oh wait, chamomile. Sorry. Chamomile. My eyes aren't working. 36. Let's see. I'm not quick on my. I wouldn't make the best doctor here. Hold on, let me look it up. Well, it's not in that part. Anyway, yes, it's in the books. We can look it up later. We can do a whole episode on chamomile probably, because it's good stuff.
There was another question here, and I'm missing it. Oh! Somebody was wondering the eternal question: why are you so obsessed with nutmeg?
Because they were.
Yes, it all started when we would read the 18th century cookbooks, and it felt like every other recipe had nutmeg in it.
Right. So, if we look in the 1799 here, abstracts of cases, we find out, and also in 1798, there's a ad in the newspaper here, and it says, Pennsylvania Hospital, No persons with infectious disease can be admitted into this house. It is therefore earnestly recommended to the citizens not to send or something any such patient to the gate who is ill with the prevailing fever. And they're probably talking about yellow fever. Several persons having been sent here improperly is the reason of giving this caution. So they don't want people with infectious diseases, at least in this time, to come into the hospital. So they treat some of those people in an outpatient setting, and then they also have patients that they think are proper for inpatient. And when we get to the 1799 paperwork, we find out that they actually broke out the cases both directions. They say, here are the number of people we treated in-house, and here are the number of people we treated as outpatients. And so we can see what if I could find those papers.
We had way too many papers today. It gets dangerous after a while.
We're going to skip that. We're going to skip that.
So, somebody is wondering what's yellow fever anyways? Just like a worse version of the regular fever?
It's that bad. And red fever is, no. Yellow fever is kind of like a malaria. It's insect-borne, and then, and then given from person to person, right? So the insect would bite the person, and the person gets sick, and then, so it was it took a long time for them to figure out what was going on with yellow fever, and even malaria for that matter. When there's kind of a two-step thing, an animal and then a person, and those were very difficult to track down for a long time. So that's why they think it's the air, or it's this or that, it's food that's causing the problem. Watermelons, those will kill you every time. You'll get malaria from watermelons. It's like, no, it's not that. So yellow fever is like, in a sense, it's a disease. It's like malaria in that you get it from insect bites.
Here's a question from John Talley. What would be the term for excessive gas being back then? And would you have been hospitalized for that? Just one of those nagging curiosities.
Well, that would be, they were being windy, being full of wind, yes.
There was a question earlier, and it was kind of complicated, and it's probably too far gone, but they were wondering about how the four humors, and that theory of medicine, how it impacted the hospitals versus the germ theory once that came, later on.
Great topic. Wish I had an answer to that.
So there is a question from Kevin Morgan. Have you heard of Dr. John Morgan of Philadelphia? He is my 6 times great uncle through his younger brother, George Morgan. He was a founder of the first medical college in colonial America.
No, not off the top of my head, but it sounds like a fascinating topic.
That's right. Okay, I'd like to catch up on some super chats.
Go for it.
Before I miss them. Okay, so there is one from Kevin Morgan, and it had a little number 1 and some celebratory balloons on it.
Okay. Well,
that's right.
Yay!
And then there is a super chat from David Denali. Happy weekend, cool topic, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and someone was wondering about our leech jars.
Mm-hmm.
And they were wondering why we didn't have them anymore, but I thought you might like to talk a little bit about leeches and how everyone always loved the leech jar.
Yeah, I mean, leeches are an important part of medicine in the 18th century, and we still use them today. I mean, I go to the doctor and get a leech all the time. But yeah, they're kind of like a controlled bloodletting, right? And a small, slow bloodletting, and they would have these medicinal leeches, and they would have them in a jar. Sometimes they'd have a special little test tube with a leech in it, and you had to go out and kind of hunt these leeches down. So some people would earn their living by going out and getting leeches, and then sell.
That sounds pretty easy to me. Just go walk around in a pond.
Yeah, but you need big medicinal leeches, not those little tiny ones.
Yeah, well, you just
it's
gotta
like
find the right
giant
one.
slug that sucks the blood out, Anyway, so yeah, leeches were a thing, and so they would keep them in these jars, and you had to be careful. You didn't want them to die, and so it's like you would have a fish tank with leeches in it, basically.
You got to keep them moist. You don't want them to dry out.
Oh yeah,
Poor little leeches.
Stay in the
They're
water.
doing great work there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm all caught up.
Okay. So, 1799, they have it broken out in outpatient, inpatient, and I think this is inpatient. And so they had lunacy, again, the highest one, swellings, dyspepsia. No one was cured of dyspepsia. I can imagine that. Sores, ulcers, eruptions, of whom one has leprosy. Epilepsy, rheumatism, bruises, blindness, frostbitten, diseased spine, fever, paralytic, fractures, yellow fever, deafness, locked jaw. Man, that hurts. Consumption, stricture, inflammation, diarrhea. So inpatient here, they were down to 195, of which only 68 were called cured. So it didn't do as well. And then all these outpatients here, a lot more. Fevers, they were inoculating people for smallpox. Then they have people for natural smallpox, pleurisy, consumption, yellow fever, rheumatism, dysentery, diarrhea, cholera, palsy. Let's see, we've got fits, we have dropsy, we've got diseased liver, we've got malignant sore throat, which is a problem, big problem, eruptions, inflammation, swelling, one single, or is it 7? Trying to see the number here. There is a laying in here, which is just somebody in for pregnancy and childbirth. Worms, wounds, contusions, ulcers, piles, venereal, itch, scurvy, worms. Whee! So, fascinating. I mean, and we're just kind of just skating over the top. I think if we really dug in, the history of the hospital itself is fascinating, and you can find out a lot more about that on the University of Pennsylvania website. It has a whole section on the history of this hospital and different things. They got a timeline. They've got a thing about Benjamin Rush. There's a bunch of great information, as well as what we can find here in the the primary documentation as we dig into the newspapers. No old baby.
Okay, there's a super chat from John Talley. Was cleanliness an issue in hospitals? Did they know about germs and such? What cleaning agents would they use?
So they talk about that a lot in the St. Augustine Hospital episode that we've done in the past. Now, this doesn't speak to this very much, except for the allusion here that we've got to the large quantity of vinegar. And so, they know that some cleaning is important. Where that comes in and when they start to talk about those things specifically, there are probably timelines for that. If we look at the documentation and the things that are written by different surgeons in the time period, we can kind of start to see that. But I don't think we get as much of a full knowledge about how important those things are for surgery until even years later. And some of those things are probably even learned by accident. The idea that you would wash over an area with something like alcohol. So apparently in the time period, somebody was doing that because they thought that the coolness of the alcohol on the skin would help the person deal with the shock. But it turns out that they also had a better result because of course, things were sterilized. So some of those things are totally by accident.
I really did like, and in the St. Augustine, not only did they do they kind of discuss how it was, what they did in that particular location, but it touches on what the understanding was in other locations. Right. There is a super chat from Aglio Eolio. Cooking episode on hospital food when the poor patients feast.
I don't know that they had any specialized food except for the typical things, and we've actually done a few episodes on food for the sick.
That's true.
And the main thing being a posset, which is sort of like a warm curdled milkshakey thing. I don't know what.
Well, and then there was the panada.
Yeah, and there's panada, which is sort of like a pap that you make with milk and breadcrumbs. So we've done a couple episodes on healing foods.
All right. Did you want to mention the CD one more time? I'm trying to think of the things that we haven't gotten. Where's my...
So, unfortunately, I never did find the Patreon people, but I want to thank those people, even if I don't have the paper with their names on it, and I'll get it for next week. We do have Caleb's thing here, right? Just Caleb's CD. Also, are mugs available on the website yet? So there's still some.
We will have new mugs next week. No, that one is available.
So
absolutely.
we do have some fun stuff on the website. Maybe even a medical book, like the bone setter. So we do have some medical books on the website, and lots of fun stuff. And no, leeches don't eat nutmeg. It'd probably kill them.
I remember what that thing. I was wondering if you wanted to give a medical disclaimer just in case.
Oh yeah. None of the things I've talked about here today about healing or medicines that they use in the time period should be thought of as medical advice today.
Perfect.
Just don't do it. Just no. Except for maybe chamomile. I mean, I'm not going to probably, diss that. It's probably, these books are always fun to go digging in, but you never want to follow their advice. We're there. We did it. We skimmed through this. I'm telling you, we just skimmed it. There's a bazillion things more here to learn and understand. This is 1794, 1799. The hospital was started almost 50 years earlier than this. A well-established and great groundbreaking institution for the time period. So fascinating, great stuff. And yeah, be careful drinking that cold water. You might end up in the hospital. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Ivy. Thank you, incredible members and anyone here watching. Thank you for being part of the community and having fun learning with us. And it's, I didn't get a chance to go off on all these things today because the topic was so huge and interesting. But it's always great to hang out in the... we should have had some anatomical jars or stuff laying around.
That would have been excellent.
Maybe we could find things that were like fake-looking organs or whatnot. That would have been good.
Well, but some people were mentioning that they were eating their supper while they were watching, so maybe not.
Okay, probably a good idea. Thank you for being part of the live stream today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for watching.